Our clothes have a way of answering this question. But how do we know when municipal government spending has reached its limits, particularly education spending, which is the subject of this presentation? One doesn't need a smoke signal decoder ring to clarify the signals the taxpayers have sent for 9 of the last 10 years, defeating one or both budgets, often multiple times. Most recently, in 2018, the education budget failed twice, and the town budget failed 3 times. Why are taxpayers who benefit from town services and from property values enhanced by well-funded schools with a good reputation so predictably opposed to budget increases? Well, the tax base is limited and not growing, prospering, or diversifying. Enrollment is declining, and that decline is accelerating. The state funding for education is systematically retreating. Public schools have not adjusted and are budgeting in defiance of gravity, and households are being forced to make painful decisions between food, heat, medicine, and taxes, and find saving for college and retirement impossible. The boards of education, Selectmen and Finance need a wake-up call. Even after budget referendum defeats, from 2010 to 2017, Clinton property taxes increased 15%. At the same time, the population declined 2%, and households declined only slightly less. Median household income only recovered slightly in 2017, up 3% over 7 years. Taxes increased at nearly 5 times that rate in that period. Last October, Clinton Public Schools Superintendent Marianne O'Donnell illustrated how enrollment has declined and how that decline is accelerating.
But these graphs represent the NESDEC enrollment reports in a graphical model. And this is the district since 2010. So the first is 2009-10 all the way through the current day. So in this time span, we've decreased we have decreased 282 students as a district, spread out K through 12. This graph represents going forward. So 2018 is the first bar, the tallest bar, and going forward through 2027-28, these are projections. Some of them are actually based on the actual birth rate, and some are projected birth rate through their statistical models. But you can see that we're projected to continue to decrease and decline in our student enrollment.
Since 2010 through this year, enrollment is down 282 students, or 13.9%. While even after budget defeats, the education operating budget, not including debt service or capital, is up $4 million, or 14%. That translates into an operating budget cost increase per pupil of 32.3% over 9 years, or 3.3% each and every year. Remember, household incomes increased just 3% through 2017. At the same time, state funding for Clinton education is on the decline, as reported last October by Superintendent O'Donnell.
Ultimately, in 2017, the legislature and the state legislature, when we didn't have a budget till October, they reorganized and redid the funding formula for this grant. And in doing so, it greatly impacts Clinton over the next 8 to 9 years. So right now, we get $5.7 million approximately, and you'll see it in the graph in a second, here in Clinton to offset our entire budget. Okay, it comes to the town and it offsets the costs that we require. This is the graph of what is projected to happen with the new formula that was passed a year ago at the state level to Clinton. And we can see that it's not going in the right direction. So what this really means, just quick, if you compare the two bars, right now, this year, you can see we get almost $5.7 million. By 27-28, we're down to $3.7 million. In red, that's the reality for us. Every year, on average, the state's going to give us about $214,000 less to the town to offset costs. So what do you do about that? You either cut, you reduce, or we make it up in taxes or find another revenue source, right? So those are challenges that, as we looked at the whole financial reality, that are putting pressure on us as a school system in this community. And we are part of that and need to figure out a way to move forward so that we can sustain what we have and thrive. Again, a quick show of what's happening to our costs and then the state funding. And that is our reality.
Remember last May when signs went up alerting voters to impending surpluses? The Vote Yes lobby wanted you to discount those projections and erected signs unfairly and falsely, accusing these signs of lying. Now, the 2018 report is in, and the facts are undeniable. Of the overall operating budget surplus of $1.3 million, $688,000 was the education operating surplus. To that, add a revenue surplus of $1.6 million, for a total operating surplus of $2,959,000. And we haven't even addressed the savings from the closing of Pierson. Here's what Superintendent O'Donnell estimated will be saved closing Pierson when she briefed the public last October.
The group also pushed me a little bit to go back, and we have looked at this very carefully, to go back into the operating budget, that if we were to close Pierson, what might that look like? And I hesitate to start to put numbers to things, right? But in reality, as we looked at, if we didn't need phones at Pierson, and we didn't need, to heat that building, and we didn't need to plow the driveway anymore, and we didn't need all of those support components, utilities, everything that goes into supporting the building. And then we looked at the potential of personnel and different benefits that then change if we were to close Pierson, and tried to capture those costs. Now, this slide shouldn't be misleading in that the majority of personnel have to remain, because even if we close Pierson, we're moving grades, so we don't get rid of people. And I know, we feel very strongly about that. But just as we have over the years, we have consolidated programs and we have reduced staff because our numbers don't support it. And that's our charge, and we have to do that. But we have to do it in a way that doesn't impact our kids' education. And so these numbers are looking at the current budget. We're just beginning our process. That number could go up, it could go down. But ultimately, we needed to get a snapshot and felt strongly we wanted to share a little bit of that itemization of snapshot with you to give some context to the potential cost savings if we were to close the building.
These estimates only included savings from the Pierson Cost Center and failed to include savings from the district-wide and maintenance cost centers. These were made in October of last year. So now, fast forward to January 2019 for more comprehensive accounting.
The second piece is cost savings, and as I've kind of talked to the board about, I have that detailed redistribution of where we have savings and where costs were redistributed. So although we have staff we have students moving to two different schools, the staff basically needs to go with them, but where we could realize efficiencies, we wanted to do that. When we did our committee initially, when I presented, we had a very conservative estimate of somewhere around $500,000 in costs. We have looked very, very carefully as we developed our redesign, what our needs were there and where we could reduce, not just personnel, but also operational, supplies, all sorts of things. So this is a very short synopsis to fit on the slide of what we are projecting in our savings in closing of Pierson. And you can see the different categories, and as I mentioned, there is the detail behind it, so I can share with the board what that looks like in terms of what is being redistributed in terms of staffing and other supply needs at the schools.
You would expect with that kind of savings, the operating budget for 2020 might be reduced at least a little bit. If that is what you guessed wrong.
So by doing that, that's the process that we did. The salary increases with current staff as it is, no changes, would be $750,186. Okay, that's just taking everybody contractual changes as we go into 1920. The employee benefits cost increases is listed there. And then, as I shared with the board, what's new in this budget, we looked at that last week. That's the total amount that deals with our math curriculum implementation. It deals with some of the new items, and you'll see that a little later in the budget. That puts us in accomplishing our strategic plan, and just staying where we are, rolling it up, would put us tonight presenting to you, if I didn't have other cost savings, a 4.56% increase, or $1.4 million. So now let's look at all of the pieces that we've done. If you take the number of reductions from the Pierson closing, and then you take all the other line items, and we'll talk about a few tonight, everything else that we've been able to contain or pull or be more efficient or go out to bid and save, there's another $48,150, which gets us to where basically where I am tonight, which is the $605,000. So a normal budget last year when we started this, we were at 4.5. We brought it, I think when I presented it was at 3.62, and then we went through a process. So the driving costs are around our employee benefits and our salaries. And that is always our major drivers, and then there's always a couple other lines. So we need to continue to contain those salary costs with, fair but diligent negotiations, as well as looking at health costs, because those continue to drive the increases in our budgets. So that's kind of how we got there to this amount, despite the fact that we're closing the school and we're saving. So we're back to kind of that summary page of where we stand right now.
The $688,000 in the 2018 surplus was $78,000 more than the operating budget increase from 2017. On top of that was added $478,000 for an operating budget increase for fiscal 2019. And now the superintendent proposes yet another $605,000 to the budget 2020. Altogether, that is a $1.77 million increase over 3 years. The message is clear, no matter what. No matter a decline in population or households, no matter stagnant household income, no matter accelerating enrollment declines, or cuts in state funding, or embarrassing operating surpluses, even after closing 1 of 4 schools, the operating budget must increase year after year after year, no matter what. The minimum budget requirement usually forces budgets to ratchet up each year to protect the state cost-sharing grants. So this year's budget is next year's minimum, plus any increase in cost-sharing grants. This assumes grants always go up, but makes no provision for when they are cut instead. But do allow for reductions of $3,000 for each student decreased in enrollment, or a larger cut when closing a school. So if we don't seize the closing of Pierson to make a significant adjustment, we may never be able to again, without jeopardizing what little is left in the cost-sharing grants. How much should we cut? Instead of a $605,000 increase, with the benefit of hindsight and the wisdom of foresight, we must cut $1 million from the 2019 operating budget going forward in 2020. Given the 2018 surplus, the increase in 2019, and the proposed increase for next year, and the operating cost savings closing Pierson, a $1 million year-over-year cut is realistic and more than reasonable. It is not only reasonable, it is imperative, because the MBR makes it now or never. Let's face it, education spending in Clinton has exceeded Clinton's taxpayers' means, and they've been saying so for most of a decade by defeating budgets at referendum. Enrollment declines are accelerating. The state is cutting funding that local residential and commercial property taxpayers can't be expected to just absorb. It would be shameful to close Pierson and derive no real taxpayer benefit from it. This is a singular opportunity to tighten the education budget, and it must not be squandered. This video written, narrated, and produced as a public service by Kirk Carr, the Kirkster. Thank you for watching.